Hello friends, I have such a fun thing to share with you today. I'm going to be painting hellebores. They're also called a Lenten rose, which I just named, but what's interesting is hellebores aren't roses at all. They're actually part of the ranunculi family. I thought that was kind of cool. Let me grab this book. So there's this book here, which I thought was really cool. And the reason I bring it up is it was referred to me. It's a true story, and it's called The Girl Who Drew Butterflies. And she courageously, I'm reading from the book, studied painted insects, butterflies, and what's cool about it is it was back in a time when women weren't really taken seriously in science or art. Remember, this is a true story. So she has a great story here, and this was brought to my attention by one of our followers. Her name's Kristen, that teaches her, homeschools her children, and she used this to share this story with them. And she did all these flowers and caterpillars and the metamorphosis of them. And her work was really kind of revolutionary for the time, both artistically and scientifically. So I thought, there was a hellebore in here, and I thought, what fun. So anyways, even right here, look at this, Witch Hunts, the danger of being different. She was different. So what a great book if you want a fun little read. And meanwhile, let's paint our hellebores. So hellebores have 5 petals. So what I did is I used my guidelines here. I've got my center, and I'm going to draw kind of darker so you guys can see. Make sure I have my kneaded eraser I'll go over with afterwards. And 5 guidelines for our petals, just like this. And then maybe 1 down here, that's kind of sideways, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll do 1 of the petals kind of in front there. And hold on, let me grab something here. I brought up a picture of the hellebores in person as well. And then maybe we can just do a little small bud over here. Okay, so right off the bat, what this reminded me of, their petal shape, was a filbert brush. So I'm going to go ahead and use my filbert brush. You can use any 10 filbert brush. I will link a Princeton down below. My brushes are sold out. And the color I think I'm going to go for, it's kind of like a dark purpley color. They come in all kinds of beautiful colors. So I'm going to mix let's go with this purpley color over here. I'm going to stick with the rose violet. I want it to be a little bit darker in color, almost like a wine color. So I'll mix some of maybe my sienna in there to warm it up a bit. Something like that. Now that's getting a little bit dark. Look at that color. Isn't that gorgeous? It's like this warm, yummy color. And then I think I'll add a little bit more rose pink or even some red to it, because I noticed they had quite a bit of reddish color. There's all different colors. And then the brush stroke that I'm going to use, let me show you. And this is on my Artisto paper, by the way, which I absolutely love. So many of you are enjoying this. 140-pound cold press. And I'm using my Paul Rubens My Lane paintings, pigments. All right, so the first stroke I'm going to do here, I want to go in with a lighter value. So I've got about 80% water, 20% pigment. And I'm going to use, look at that beautiful filbert brush. It's like the perfect petal shape. So I'm going to point using the tip of my brush, and then I start applying more pressure as I come in. They've got a bit of a tip on them like that. And then we'll do another one here. I'm overlapping a bit there. keep going, and I can always go in and kind of darken. There we go. So cute, aren't they? There we go. So there is the first Hellebore. They have the 5 petals, and they have sepals. The sepals kind of protect the bud, and we'll go in after and do those. So I'm going to, actually, I think what I could do as well is go in with just this really light version of this, like that, and go in for this one. So point, press, and I'm dragging my brush a bit to the side as well, because I want to make this flower my star. Just turning my brush a bit. So using the chisel edge, point, press. And then this part of the flower is that edge. So I'll go in. And I come up, I'm using that chisel edge on its side. And what I did here is I didn't compete with this flower over here because I made this lighter. Now, normally I would go in and I would have lightened up some of those lines, but I wanted you to see those. And what I'm doing right here is just, I picked up a little darker value. You can tap off your brush and going in with that chisel edge and just kind of creating some little lines here. So Kristen, I hope you're watching this. This is for you, those beautiful little kids that are lucky enough to have mom homeschooling them, and just creating some interest there. I'm gonna go in with that darker value, tap, 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 and just tap in a bit at the bottom to show where it's kind of curling up. Could even go into the center here, but we're gonna go back into that center area and create those sepals. So right here, I can do the same thing. Actually, I think what I'll do here is one little swoosh just to re-wet this a bit. I don't wanna work it too much, because that's going to create some interesting effects. And then I will go in, just barely damp, you guys, and create those same darker little lines. So a little darker pigment, tap, 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 go in just along the edges, tapping in, using maybe the side of my brush to get a few. I'm gonna pick up a little bit more of that. Oop, not the dark blue purple. I want more of that. Yeah. So I added a little pigment with the red or violet red, and you can always go back in. So I started very lightly, intentionally, because I want to make sure it doesn't take over the whole flower. And just tapping in along the edge. Just creating some interesting edges like that. We could even go in now at this point, and I'm just going to use my little fun contraption here. I will link it down below, and scrape in some of those sepals, and then we'll go back and add some yellow. Now this one I can still pull out because that's wet. And there you go. Now let's take our brush again, our little filbert, light value because we've already got weight on this side with the Hellebore. That's a dark color. And you know what? I think I'm going to go in the middle. I washed and rinsed my brush and pick up a little bit of that pigment. Look how fun and interesting that makes it. Just kind of playing here. So this is a thirsty brush. I'm wiping it onto my towel, and it just gives it a little dimension. And then this side of my brush, I can pull some of those lines. Like that. And let's create our other one over here. Some water on my brush, tap, tap, tap. Go in for that darker value. Tap in at the bottom, let it kind of spread. And there we go, look at that. Isn't that fun? Tap in a little bit more dark. And now we'll go in for our leaves. So let me grab my green. I'm just going to use my tree green, put some of that in here. And I can still even use this filbert brush. Tap, tap, tap. And go in. And create our little stems. There we go. And let's have a few of our leaves coming up behind. You know, I love those leaves that come up behind. I think they add so much interest. Tap, tap, tap. So I can load my brush up with as much paint as I want. I want to make sure I'm tapping my brush to get rid of any of that extra. And let's just have a leaf coming out of here using that chisel edge, and then point, press, point, press, bringing that leaf down. There we go, just kind of forming it out. And I'm even going to add some little edges to my leaves, just for some interest. So really interesting there. Now let's do maybe one coming up here. I love to hide my leaves. I think it's so fun and makes so much more sense. And then we could have one coming out here and maybe sticks out to the side here. Isn't that fun when you do that? It really creates a lot more interest in your leaves. And I'm even okay with it blending a little bit with that. Then we'll have a few come out down here. Point, press. I'm opening up that brush. Point, press. Tap in a little bit of that green at the end and here and there. Another one coming out from there. Maybe a smaller one. So I'm using both the chisel edge to kind of round out my leaves and shape them a bit. And I'm also using the flat side of that brush. Let's put one here. So it's that same point press. When I press, it opens up the belly and I get that wide fat leaf. Now before that completely dries, I'm gonna go in with a little bit of that pink we had and just tap into a few of my leaves. I love doing this because I feel like it really connects the leaves to our flower and makes it all look like they're together. If that doesn't spread, mine are, but if you waited too long and that spreads a little too much, you can also dip your brush in your water, scrape it off, and just tap in a bit next to that, and it will help it bleed. But let it sit a while, because sometimes it will continue bleeding as you go. So I think we're basically done here. The only thing I would do now is add in maybe a few of those green little sepals. So let's grab our green, a dark value, so probably 80% pigment, 20% water. Tap, tap, tap. And let's just go in and add into the middle here, right here. We don't need that one. And actually, I think I'll grab, I want a really thin line. So I'm gonna wash and rinse my brush, and I'm going to grab my 8 round and pick up some of that paint, maybe even a little yellower green. So I'm gonna grab my lighter green, which is the yellow green, and we're just gonna go in and pull out some little lines like this. Kind of following those lines we scraped in, like that. Oh, these are such fun little flowers, aren't they? Very, very light touch. This is why it's so important to practice making thin and thick lines. Then I'll go in with my cad yellow just to put some of those cute little round balls on the ends of those, just little dabs. Like that. Maybe this one. And look how fun. If you really wanted to add an extra little punch here, I've had videos on this, the push and pull. You could definitely go in here with a darker version of that color. So let's go back. Now you could be done right here and be perfectly fine with it. But let's go in and add a little darkness around the edges. So picking up a darker value of the same paint, meaning I put more pigment in there. Tap, tap, tap. Look at all that comes off. And I'm just going to go around the edge. I'll just do 2 at a time because I don't want this to dry. Now I'm going to wash and rinse my brush. Tap it off on a paper towel so it's just damp. And then I go in and very lightly push and pull this like that. See what a difference? So I'm just tapping in with the tip of my brush and pulling it out. But look at that. Let's go in here, just dotting in the dark value because you're gonna go in and pull it out so it can be pretty dark. I even got that wonderful bleed into my petal, or my leaf, which I'm not worried about. I'm gonna turn my paper and push and pull. Tap my brush off. Push and pull. I'm just barely going into that edge with the tip of my brush. There we go. And what fun. It even kind of went into some of that yellow, which I love. Go in, I needed a little bit more pigment. And you could do this a few times to get that darkness you want. You could go back in here and do the push and pull again, or just add in your pigment. If you want to soften that edge, just go in and kind of pull it out like that. Dry brush. If you don't want this hard edge, just lift it up. Dry brush is your friend. And now I'll go in here, just barely tapping into that edge. Dry brush. And look at that. See? Much prettier, isn't it? Now that is really the focal point. So I can always go in here and add in a little bit, but I really want this to be the main character. Now, if I don't, I'm fine with it, but if I didn't want that bloom, again, dry brush, pick it up, and it cleans it right up. Now, I don't mind that. I like the purple in my leaf, but if you don't like that, you can definitely do that. Now, we would want to, the only thing I'm seeing here is I might want to add a little bit more darkness on this side to balance out because we've got such dark pieces up here. So I'm just going to grab a little bit more of my dark value paint, meaning it has a little more pigment in there. And let's just go in, point, press, and put another glaze over that. And what that does is before we kind of had this big dark part up here. Now we've got kind of a zigzag and some other elements that balance it out. Zig, zag, zig. All right, everybody, I hope you give this a try. Such a pretty little flower. And if you get a chance, you know, what a great lesson for your kids to read about this. She really was, you know, such a pioneer. And I love her flowers and caterpillars and butterflies and all kinds of fun stuff. Really revolutionary in what she was doing, both scientifically and artistically. So I hope you give this a try. I will make a little tutorial kit for this. And thank you to our follower, Kristen, for sharing this flower. And I will see you all soon. I hope you have fun. Remember, you are an artist.